Hello, so my name's Jonathan Green. I'm a production designer and member of the British Film Designers Guild, and welcome to this BFDG peer mentoring group where we're talking to concept modelers, concept artists and storyboard artists. The BFDG is a flourishing professional organisation of art department creatives and production designers spanning the various branches of the art department in film, TV and commercials. And our membership comprises of over 630 accredited members. Since its formation over 75 years ago, our prime objective has been to raise the profile of the art department and to promote and encourage excellence within the art department, as well as protecting the interests of its members, nurturing new talent and showcasing our members' work. Those core principles still apply today, and we're thriving creative community, and we welcome different backgrounds, cultures and abilities, and realize that diversity fuels creativity, and we believe that our industry has the potential to thrive, innovate and grow by embracing exciting new talent. So I know that we have a lot of new talents with us today, hoping to get some great information from our panel of artists. So I've got a number of questions here and I'm going to dive straight. I'll tell you, before I do that, let's have a little go around the room and everyone can introduce themselves and just say what they do, and for people that may not know, just a very brief explanation of what their job involves. So in no particular order, I'll start with you, James, if I may.
Hey guys, hey, I'm James O'Shea. I'm a storyboard artist, working on shooting scripts, pitches, and for visual effects shows.
Thank you. And next up, Eva, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Well, my name is Eva Kuntz, and I'm a concept artist, and I work with various production designers on visualizing ideas and selling ideas to directors, producers, etc. Really. So I usually do a lot of period films, like the Fantastic Beasts movies 2 and 3, and I've just come off a slightly different one, totally different one, Barbie. Which sort of stretched me in terms of the use of pink. So I've learned to embrace pink. My color palette is usually more gray and subdued. So that's been a bit of an adventure, a good one. So that's me really.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Rob, go to you next, please.
Yeah, hi, I'm Robert Bean. I'm a concept modeler. I work in the art department. I've been working on film productions for probably about the last 25 years, but 14 years in the art department. I used to work for construction as a sculptor, but now work solely in the art department, and I use those techniques that I learnt on the construction side of things to inform the way I make the models for the art department. I hand build models, I scratch build models, but I also use 3D printers, both FDM and photo resin printers, whatever's more appropriate for the job, really. I use a sort of limited color palette on my models, sometimes a bit of color, sometimes black and white, but whatever really is required to get the idea across.
Great, thank you very much. Stephen?
Yeah, hi there, my name's Stephen Forrest-Smith. I'm working as a storyboard artist, mostly on feature films. I've been working in the film industry for over 20 years in a variety of different roles, but I've been mostly working as a storyboard artist probably for the last 15, 16 years.
Thank you, that's great. And finally, Dominic.
Hello, I'm Dom Lavery, been concept artist for 27 years for my sins. That's it. That's all. I've directed as well. Directed animation with Jerry Anderson for a number of years. But I've sort of like started as a concept artist, and just still am one, just about.
Very good. Well, thank you all for your introduction. I've got a load of great questions from people that have sent them in. I've got a ton of questions myself that I'm itching to ask, which if there's time at the end, I'll dive in as well. But I'm going to start off by a very easy question. How did you get into the industry? And I'm going to ask Dominic, because it was a while ago by the sound of it.
Okay, how long have we got tonight? Because you could take. So yeah, I mean, when I started,
what was your route in basically? How did you get your first job?
Well, when I finished art school and stuff like that, I was a book cover, video cover, private illustrator, all that kind of stuff. Didn't really make much money out of it, to be honest with you, for the amount of work you did. Worked for Manga for a bit, doing covers for them. That was all right. But then I was more aware of film and film design and stuff, and there wasn't many concept artists around in those days. So I started to be a pain in the arse to people up at Pinewood. I go in and show my work and chat and get to know people. I did a few like smaller jobs and some creature work. And then one day I was delivering some work. Can't remember who it was for now. It's gone out of my head. And the person I was chatting to said there's a big French movie had moved in. Nobody knew anything about it. Told me where it was. It's in J Block. So I went up, left my work. Nobody there. I got home and there was a message on my answer phone saying, "Oh, we'd like to see you." So of course there's no mobiles back then. So I literally jumped in my car, drove all the way back to Pinewood again, and got to meet the guys, and that's how I got the job on Fifth Element. And
wow,
it didn't stop after that. And now look at me.
Yeah. I think that's a general theme, isn't it, for getting your first job? You just got to be persistent, haven't you? Really, you've got to put yourself out there.
Yeah, but not a pain.
Really,
when I said
not
I was
a pain, it's a very fine line for sure.
I was being a bit disingenuous there, but no, you just got to get your name around, show your work, constantly update your portfolio. Don't keep on showing the same stuff that you've done over and over. You're going to the same people, got the same stuff. You're not going anywhere if you're showing the same work. Keep updating your portfolio, keep learning new things. But fundamentally, you've got to show the work that is relevant to the job you're going for. So in concept,
and I would also say get on the phone and try and speak to people, because it's just too easy for people to ignore email. So obviously, again, don't be a pain, but do try and speak to people in person if you can.
Because they're very, very busy people in the art department, very busy. And once a film is actually up and running, they forget about you. Because there's so much other things going on. And so you've got to remind them, you've got to remind the production designer, you've got to remind the supervising art director that you're about, and you're keen. So, yeah, there you go.
That's great. Thank you. That's really good. The next question is there's two questions that I feel I can roll into one, which is, have you done any other jobs within the art department? And what are your opinions on trying different roles within the art department instead of following maybe a drafting route? I mean, I think I would, before I get you experts to answer, I would say that any kind of extra experience you can get within the art department is definitely going to serve you well within the concept storyboard world, I would say. But Eva, what do you think about that? Have you done anything else before you ended up as a concept artist?
I did a couple of assistant jobs. I did one on Troy for my sins before going to the NFTS to do the production design course. And when I left, I did some, again, an assistant job on Sweeney Todd. And I think it's useful because I think it just gives you a greater understanding. You sort of learn what everybody else does. You go around, you make people cups of tea, or you do the print run or whatever, and you just talk to people and you understand more how this whole sort of ecosystem, art department system, how it sort of works. I think so. I think it's probably a very good idea.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would agree with that.
And just you going down and see how the sets are built. You know, you wander down to the workshop or the plaster shop or whatever. And it's just, I mean, I'm sort of dead curious, and I like to just walk about and, you know, and I think that was probably quite beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've also done lots of commercials as a concept artist, which was also quite a good training ground, because you often get asked to do things you might not like, or you might, and you have to work at a great speed, and that's, and you know, and you just have to say, okay, I mean, if you want it all green or something, I'll, you know, there goes, and you do a good job, and move on.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Eva. What, for a question for James, what films or series inspire you most in your approach to composition and staging action?
Yeah, sometimes when I get a sequence, like I used to work with this old producer, Frank, who used to say, you know, watch everything. And sometimes lots of films might come into my mind. I worked on this American show, and they had a big car, like a big truck crash sequence in it. And the whole reference point of it was kind of 70s styles films, like the 7-Ups, Freebie and the Bean, French Connection, like the French short, A Certain Rendezvous. So sometimes when I'm really looking at stuff, sometimes I look up the stunt coordinators and see what other films they've done. So we were looking a lot at Death Proof. So like I'd look at the stunt coordinator on that, Buddy Joe Hooker, and then just get hold of all the films he might have worked on. And then you realize, oh, it's like one of my favorites, like To Live and Die in LA, driving up the freeway the wrong direction, and Rumblefish, Outsiders. So I have like personal favorites, but if, like lots of directors do, like when I'm working on stuff, I watch dozens and dozens of films or shows. So if there's something specific, I'll look someone up and see what they've done. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, do you find that when you're employed on a job that you're kind of steered in a certain direction anyway towards style and inspiration, or are you left to your own devices at that stage?
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, like it can be both situations. So, for example, on that American show, the director just gave me his pitch deck treatment, and I pretty much got to do what I want. I just did all the sequences. But for other directors, it can be different. I have to show them each frame at a time. Or even one time on Zoom, the director wanted to watch me draw live on Zoom, and I was doing stuff and he was going, not like that. And it's like, hey, this is rough. And so it depends.
That's a lot of pressure.
Just dovetail to, it's like being a session musician for different bands. You know, one day it's Kraftwerk, next day it's Thin Lizzy.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy. I like that. And Stephen, question for you. How much of your work is produced in the company? James has alluded to this slightly. Produced in the company of the director, and how much is produced working alone with feedback coming retrospectively?
Yeah, so probably most of it now is just getting a simple brief from the director and then just breaking down the script. And they like to have something put in front of them that you can then discuss in the main. So that's probably a good sort of 70–80% of the time. And then, like James was saying, then you'll have particular people who want to approach it in a different way.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Every job is so different. I certainly find that from my point of view, and I'm sure it's the same from yours. But you know, every different person that you work with works in a different way. So I guess part of that is being very flexible in your approach to how you work. Question for Rob. Have you been trained to use 3D printing and laser cutting technology or software, or did you learn on the job?
Entirely self-taught, really. Job using printers, laser cutters, It's not difficult. It's fairly straightforward. What isn't straightforward though is creating the files. You know, for 3D printers, people assume that if you've got a 3D file, whether it's a Rhino file, a 3DM, an OBJ, an STL, or whatever, that you can then put it into your printer software and slice it up and print the object. Not the case. It may be a 3D object, but it's not necessarily, in fact, most of the time, it's definitely not a 3D printable object. So drawing the stuff in 3D in a way that's, that you can put onto the machines and get a reliable 3D print is the key to it. And that has taken time, yeah. So,
And how did you find that transition from obviously coming your background as a sculptor, so actually physically making things in 3 dimensions, to then creating them in digital 3D? Was that a difficult transition for you? And how did you get into the basics of the software, which I guess is quite tricky to learn?
Yeah, well, I think I looked at it in terms of, I'm used to projecting images onto a block on 4 or 6 planes and looking through that block of material about where the projections go. And certainly with a lot of 3D software, you're pushing and pulling faces in the same way and projecting curves through blocks and lines through spheres, you know, intersecting planes in the same way. So once I got my head around how to do that, it wasn't too tricky. But just making the files watertight, the meshes good in the first place, was a bit of a learning curve for me, and it probably took 6 months of free time to get properly proficient at it. But you know, once there, you're away.
Great. And I only ask because I trained as a sculptor. I went to art school and did sculpture. And do you find that I mean, I can't quite get my head around how you would model something in 3D, but do you find that you might lose some of the nuance of the finer detail of creating a sculpture with your hands compared to doing it on a computer?
Everybody says there are 2 types of sculptors, don't they? There are people who model, who add, and there are people who carve from a block. And I've always carved from a block. So I've always looked at a solid block of material that, you know, that covers all the corners of what I'm trying, and worked out how to put through that block basically and reduce. So I reduce, you know, reduce the block. I don't model up into it.
Interesting.
I've took that approach and it works for me, you know. I understand whereas if I go on to start adding, I'm all over the place. But if I'm carving, I'm fine.
Interesting. It's really interesting. Question for Dominic. Thoughts on the emergence of AI generative programs such as Midjourney and what impact, positive or negative, they expect such programs will have on the role of concept artists? Now, I did do a little bit of homework and I had a look at Midjourney and it looks absolutely amazing. From an outsider, that is. What's your view of it as an artist?
You know, it's a very difficult question to answer at this stage because it's very new. It's very early on. It's incredible, but it is very scary as well, particularly for people working in this profession. You know, to have a piece of it's not even software, it's just algorithms where you can actually write something in and get like a series of images, even just in sketch form to start with, that you can then work up, done in minutes. I think it's quite an amazing thing, but it's quite frightening industry wise, because I mean, for a start, I mean, well, I don't know, I could talk myself into a corner with this, because you know, you can end up with a lot of people calling themselves concept artists, and they're not artists. They're just people who type in, you know, a few words into a computer and get a result. That aside, of course, you know, I've seen quite a lot of the results. I've seen some of the people I know who use it as well, and it is really quite incredible results. So, you know,
do you think you can tell when it's been used?
Oh yeah, definitely. I've already spotted Midjourney stuff where it hasn't even been labelled as Midjourney. I've spotted it because you can tell. But the thing is that it's very early on. I mean, who's to know what this will be like in a year or two? So, the other thing is, if you look at it as it is a piece of software to jump the gun on a design or an idea, brilliant. You can come up with a number of different ideas that you can then work over and work up yourself. So
do you think there's a value to it as a tool for an established artist rather than as a shortcut to becoming an artist?
No, it could be. I know established artists who are using it and have done quite amazing stuff with it. The other thing I will point out, though, is pretty much all the stuff I've seen so far is personal work. It's not work done for a company. Now, I know that on their subscription site, they do mention that if the company you're working for is making more than $1 million a year or something, you have to pay for the professional license, which is a lot. I mean, AI art has been around for a while, and I've seen other programs, and it's always been, well, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know where it's going to go, but it's interesting. Midjourney's the first time I've looked at AI art and gone, our days are numbered.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think there's always going to be a need for artists, but I guess. But
you say that
it's so hard to know how it's going to pan out.
Yeah, the way I pointed out to my wife the other day was, many years ago there were very, very talented people who built cars from hand.
Yeah.
They panel beated, all the panels and everything was all done by hand. Yeah. Computers came along and they said, oh no, all these craftsmen will still be needed. No, they weren't.
Yeah. No, it's very true. Look at stonemasons.
I don't want to put a down on it all.
No, of course.
Who knows where it's going to go? But it is a very powerful and quite a scary piece of software if you are a professional artist working in this field at the moment. And you can always say that there's always a place for true artists. But that's an artist saying that. That's not an accountant.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it leads to a wider question. I think there is a question later on about which I kind of, it's quite pertinent to what I do as well. And it's whether you need the skill of being able to draw by hand. And I personally think that that's the most crucial building block of being in any artistic discipline. And I guess with the advent of CAD and 3D design, maybe people are able to do things without actually being able to draw by hand, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, I guess this is quite a big topic that you could probably spend the whole time talking about.
All I can say is, in the years that I've been working in the industry, so it's over a quarter of a century now, it has changed massively. And although we can generate a lot more work and a lot more variations of work, and the way that I started using computers in '99, and straight away it was this, you can just do really quick changes and color changes and stuff like that. Straight away it was like, you can just do variations of things, and you do variation after variation after variation. When it was all hand drawn, for me there was a much more solid pipeline in movie making, because there was a definite path from describing what they want to reading the script to concept sketches, working up a concept art. That art passed on to art directors, draftsmen, and there was a definite pipeline. Whereas now it seems with computers, everybody seems to be doing the same thing at the same time, and it gets very messy. And I think I think there's anybody out in the industry right now who would actually disagree with me saying that.
No, sure.
It's got very messy. Apart from Steve, because he's a good boy.
No, it is messy.
I was agreeing with you. I was agreeing with you, Dom.
Oh, were you? Oh, okay.
I'm too.
No.
It could be a nightmare.
Yeah,
chasing your tail.
And it is a shame, because at the end of the day, we're artists and we're creative people, and we want to design. We want to come up with unique and different ideas. And ever since computers come along, we seem to be rehashing the same thing over and over again because it's quick. It's because you've got people who see images on the internet and say, make it look like this.
Yeah.
It's to
I
go
get
back
that
to
all the
the
time.
question, at least the AI thing are coming up with unique, well, unique to within an algorithm, you know,
Yes.
ideas and stuff. But even though all it's really doing is you're putting in words, it's searching through the internet for images that are relevant to the words you put in it, and then
Yeah, it's quite amazing, really, isn't it?
artwork from your words.
Yeah.
Um,
But
I
then
mean,
that, sorry.
I'll just chip in and say, I mean,
Yeah.
one side of it is that, you know, a whole section of what a concept artist has to do is actually design to a brief and actually respond to like a chain of thought, respond to a script, respond to a designer's intentions. And all those skills are still completely essential. And you can't replace that with AI. You know, all that experience and all those responses and knowing what's going to work. You know, if all you're doing is randomly generating images and putting them in front of people,
I mean,
it's not using the artist skill, really, is it? And you guys will always have that.
I mean, if you work on a period film, for instance, and you need to get a specific period of architecture right. I mean, I played with disco diffusion, and I asked for a medieval London bridge. I mean, what I got was absolutely horrendous. You know, it was neither medieval nor did you have any. Obviously, that might be my prompting, but you know, if you research some architectural style, or I don't know, 1930s Berlin, I'm not sure how well it would work.
Not at the moment. I think
No.
You know, at the moment it's great for coming up with crazy, weird, wonderful fantasy, you know, alien stuff, creature stuff, and that's what it's good at the moment. You know, coming up with all this spooky, scary stuff. But you know, I honestly do believe that, you know, as the years go on, the algorithms are going to refine. I wouldn't be at all surprised if in, you know, X amount of years' time, you'll see the first animated film that's AI generated. You know, it'll be a moving image, and it will be made in exactly the same way that, you know, Midjourney and programs like that are working now.
Well, that leads really nicely into my next question, which again is kind of very similar on what we've just been discussing. But the question to whoever wants to answer it is, how do you generate new ideas and concepts, and what happens when you get creative block, and what techniques do you use to break that? Where do you get your inspiration, and how do you generate new ideas? Eva, why don't you dive in on that one if you fancy? We still got Eva. Okay, Stephen. Oh, yeah, great. Did you hear the question?
Yes, I did. I'm a bit nerdy. I look at lots and lots and lots of reference and books.
I was going to say, is it mostly books, or do you look online?
Online as well. You know, obviously on lots of films we've got researchers, and so that might be a starting point. And for Fantastic Beasts, I found this incredible book on 1920s Berlin. You know, we've sort of showed that an incredible way of lighting shop signs. It was really ultra modern, and you think you're in the 50s, for instance. So yeah, I look to get unblocked. I look at reference, and then go from there. I mean, depending also on what's asked for by the designer.
Yes.
Yeah, it does very much depend on the sort of film.
Yeah.
It's sort of, you know, what you're actually working on. You know, if you're working on a you know, a period film or whatever, then obviously your first port of call is reference, is, you know, authentic reference to the period of the film you're working on. But you know, if you're doing science fiction, fantasy, stuff like that, you know, I still believe, and it's very rarely done like this, but I still believe the best port of call is no computers. It's a sketch pad, it's a pencil, and it's using your brain to come up with unique and wonderful things that have never been seen before, you know, because you're not being influenced by anything else that's around you. And then, you know, then you can move on from there. But, you know, it's very rarely done like that these days. You're just given a bunch of reference that somebody's collected off the internet and say, kind of like this stuff, can you make it kind of like this? And, you know, so to answer the question of, where do you get your influence from? It again, it depends on the film, but usually you are sent reference as a guide. But I do work for designers who are fantastic and just say, Dom, just come up with some stuff. You read what's needed in the script. That's really important. You don't design something that isn't going to be relevant to the action. It's got.
Well, then that's why you get employed, isn't it? So you use your expertise. And I always hate people that are so prescriptive about what they want from people. You kind of want to let the creatives be creative rather than try and channel them too much, because you never know what they might come up with.
It's a team effort. It's not just you on your own. Pete Lamont, bless him, he always said the most important part of it is the team, because you all work as a team, you feed off each other and you get the job done. If you're working all on your own and just at the end of the day, even, as a concept artist, you do a pretty picture, hand it over and say, look what I've done, isn't it great? And it's got nothing to do with the script, the action, the budget as well. It's got to fit a budget, which a lot of people don't understand. If it doesn't fit those categories, you're going to be told to do it again. And, that's probably the hardest thing as a concept artist when you're first starting out. The hardest thing is being told it's wrong. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. Do another one. Now do one like this. Do one like that. You don't do your one pretty picture and say, there you go, aren't I great? It doesn't work like that.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Really great answers. Rob, I'm going to bring you back in. How often are your models based off of pre-existing concept art, and are you ever given free rein to concept and generate ideas in 3D?
Yeah, well, to be honest, most of the time I'm allowed pretty much to play with the ideas. And I get some concept art. I get I'll get layout of the stage and where stuff's got to go. I'll get a pack of reference images, and but they employ me to come up with a real life 3D solution to scale, so that I put everything together in the space, in perspective, get the light and the contrast on the set from the surfaces that I'm applying and things like that. So yeah, I get to I get pretty much free rein on most of the stuff that I do. And quite a lot of the time, the models that I come up with are then the final set solutions, or scanned, photogrammetry, sliced up into rib stations, all that sort of stuff, built full scale directly from the organic models that I create. So generally, I don't work to very many drawings at all, I would say.
Interesting. And Stephen, this is another slightly technical question. How does your role overlap with those working in VFX previs, if at all?
Yeah, more and more. I mean, it depends on the scale of the production, because that tends to indicate the scale of the VFX kind of involvement in the show. But I mean, pretty much everything now has visual effects. So generally, the storyboards are wanted by previs. So the previous teams want to have storyboards to work from. It's just the degree of interaction you have with them. Often it's just simply a handover, and then they just run off and carry on with it, really. And then you do find that things come back to storyboarding after previous either run out of time, run out of money, or just literally just can't get it sorted out quickly enough. And then also I'm finding that I'm being employed not just in the art department. So, I've worked for editorial, I've worked for the visual effects department, I've worked for second unit directors directly. So yeah, we're not just art department storyboard artists anymore. We're becoming something else, I think. Yeah.
And how detailed do your drawings have to be? Do you find that as time has gone on, you're having to put more detail into storyboards, or are they still more kind of for shots and composition? Particularly if it's involving previs, are they kind of expecting you to put more detail in?
No, because there's a drive to animatics and editorial. There's very few people who can sit down and look at a set of storyboards and break them down, like certainly on a producer level now. So what they tend to want is everything to go into an edit. So what you really need to do is produce quite a simple animation, really. So you're doing a lot of kind of simpler drawings, and you're kind of being pushed into that direction, which does create problems, because then if you print that out as a storyboard, you've got hundreds of pages of drawings which don't help anybody who wants to have that on set. So yeah, we're kind of, we've been asked to serve lots of different roles, really. So you have to be quite savvy about how you approach it, really, and you have to kind of tune into what people are actually asking you to do. So it's having that wide set of skills, and just being upfront and asking the questions quite early, I think, and actually saying what do you actually need, rather than just giving them what you always do and hope that it's going to be okay.
Yeah. That's very sound advice. And a question about photo manipulation. I guess maybe Eva, maybe this is one for you. When creating concepts from existing imagery, do you find that you're often having to circumvent issues regarding the use of someone else's IP, photos, fonts, graphics? And if so, how do you ensure you avoid crossing any legal boundaries?
Good grief, I think that's a really, really good question. I have to say I've moved away from photo bashing a little bit. I usually start with a 3D model, and which are then texture and paint. So I'm kind of, I think with graphics, for instance, if I were to use graphics, I would check in with the graphics artists on the show. You know, they might have already cleared the fonts or the signs they've used if I wanted to use that in my visual. I've had a little bit of experience with clearances recently on Barbie, because one of my jobs was to design some wallpapers for one of the sort of more outrageous sets, and they were based on a very specific reference, and I had to sort of kind of, you know, take inspiration from that and then do my own thing. So basically they were totally different. You can see they were in the sort of, you know, the spirit of, and that was then sent to the clearance people, you know, this is the reference, this is where we've ended up. And then, you know, then they've said, oh, this is fine, because it's you know, you're not infringing anything. So, but I don't really know. I mean, photo manipulation. I mean, I don't really know what the I mean, if you just nicked a picture and stuck it in and so this is it, and then you have infringed it. I'm sure, but you know, if it's unrecognizable, then you probably get away with it.
There is actually, if I'm right, there's a school of reference that is a certain percentage of the, you know, if it's like, you know, more than 20% has been changed or whatever, it's fine, or it's something like that.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact thing, but there is something. I mean, I guess always take advice from production on all matters legal is probably the best advice we could give.
There is that. You know, we are working in an industry more, you know, that does love Google, and you know, I was working on okay, I better not say names and stuff, but I was working on a film a number of years ago, and I mentioned to the visual effects supervisor that, you know, we just designed by Google these days. And he said to me, he says, Dom, it's worse than that. He says, it's not designed by Google, it's designed by the first 3 pages of Google.
That's so true.
Pages, which is another reason why so much stuff all looks the same. But you know, the legal point of view is a big issue. It's an issue that I've had dealings with again on a film a number of years ago. There was a big issue with I was working on a design, and I'd been given reference by the directors of the film, and that design was basically to copy something off the internet. And I was just saying I was refusing to do it. So I was doing lots of variations and stuff, and saying, you know, you could have this kind of thing, and I kept being told, oh, can you make it a bit more like this, a bit more like this? And in the end, they said, make it like this. And so I was kind of under pressure, really. And the next thing I know, I thought, well, okay, look, I'll do this and see what happens. So next thing I know, I get a piece of paper pushed under my nose, being told to sign it. And that was basically saying that the design was completely my
goodness.
head. Right. And not only that, but under the using the references supplied. And I said, well, what references? And they then showed me the photos, and the reference I'd been given wasn't in there. And I totally refused to sign that bit of paper. And it ended up with me having discussions with the head of that film company, legal department from America. Yes. And explaining why concept artists, because that's who, you know, I was in front of. Basically, I was telling all the concept artists, if you get this bit of paper, do not sign it, because, you know, we work under the references we're given, under the guidance of production designers and directors. And I said, you know, that bit of paper needs to say that we're working under their guidance. And surprise, surprise, that bit of paper never showed up again. But, you know, what I tend to do now is a lot of reference I use, if I am going to use photo reference, is photos I've taken. I have a big library of my own photos, landscapes, textures, all sorts of stuff, or stuff that I've actually purchased off the internet.
That's really good advice as well.
Because it is, you know, that there are occasions.
It's a minefield, isn't it? Really,
it is a minefield, and film companies will hold you out to dry over it. You know, because you know we have to sign so many documents and so many legal documents now when we work on movies that you know, if you use something that legally is going to come up in court, 9 out of 10 times you're the one who's going to have to bite the bullet over it. So you know, you do have to be really careful.
Yep. Great advice. And so the next question is kind of to all of you guys. What do you think makes a good portfolio for someone looking to break into concept art?
Mid-Journey.
Slightly different for all of you because you all have slightly different disciplines. James, what do you think would make a good portfolio for someone looking to get into storyboard art?
I just think just lots of boards, figure drawing. It's interesting what the guys were sharing. I came out of hand-drawn animation, so I worked at all the, like what they called the second golden age of animation, like Space Jam, Anastasia, Quest for Camelot, Warner Brothers, all those, Walt Disney. And we used to just draw all the time. So do loads of life drawing, like drawing like people. I keep a sketchbook and just like when I'm out and about, just draw. And I think with boards, it's, I mean, I see lots of boards. I mean, lots of directors like to do their own boards. And I think it's like, if I use a music analogy again, I think you can have a power chord and a jazz chord, and they're both the same chord. So I think as long as the storyboard frame tells the people what needs to be communicated, what's happening, you know, what they're trying to achieve in that shot, that's good for me. And I think as an artist, one can develop over time. You know, you can go from a power chord to a jazz chord and develop. And I mean, I've seen it, especially in animation. And sometimes now actually also I get asked to do a lot of color boards. So what Stephen was sharing about, the last 2 shows I worked on wanted full color boards. And even the 3rd one, I talked to them about it. They wanted to do it again. And a lot of that was, I mean, that's quite a long process. And it was brilliant for me. I was loving it. And they used them for the animatics. So sometimes a bit of color. I think just lots of figure drawing, sketchbook, just like a kind of lust for the for making art and a passion for it. Yeah.
No, that's great. I think that's all really, that all sounds really valuable info. And has anyone else got anything to add about what would make a good portfolio for people trying to get into the industry?
Yeah, for storyboards, you know, I agree with what James said, but I think you want to make sure you've got a lot of variety, really, so that, you know, people are looking for a car chase, they're looking for a boat chase, they're looking for someone falling off a building. So a lot of variety, and then having a range of drawing styles from your, you know, fastest thumbnail to your most involved, beautiful, full color drawing, because then you're just firing out a shotgun, and someone will pick up on something there that they like. I think yeah, you're just making yourself more employable if you're showing variety in your work.
Yeah, I guess showcase your skills is the key, isn't it?
And I kind of agree with all of that, plus the fact that, you know, from a concept art point of view, what's really important, I think, is to show the process, the design process. Is don't just show a pretty picture. You know, a designer doesn't want to just see a pretty picture. He wants to see design. He wants to see how you've got to that point. So make sure you do show from your thumbnail sketches right through to your finished visual, the whole process and how you've developed it. And again, variety, because I've been lucky enough, I've worked on all sorts of different films over the years. You know, I've worked from historical, fantasy, science fiction, horror, you know, modern day, you know, just if that's the sort of, and because I've done that, I've had a lot of work because I'm very flexible. And I think if you want to be in that kind of field, you've got to kind of show a portfolio. Don't just have a portfolio of robots, because the fact is, you know, if you work on a film that's just about robots, and if there is a robots, they're going to employ the guys that do robots really well. So, you know, flexibility, ideas, process, really important in the portfolio. And also the fact that, you know, you also want to be relevant. So show that you can use software, show that you can use 3D if you use 3D, but also show that you can, for me, and I know it's not the most important to some people, but for me, it is the fact you can draw with a pencil and a piece of paper, because that's the most basic ability of an artist, is to think up an idea and sketch
more. Yeah, totally agree with that. Such an important skill. It leads nicely into my next question, which is, do junior roles exist within your fields? And for people wanting to get into the industry, who's employing them? Is it, so if somebody wanted to be a storyboard artist, who's going to employ them? Would it be another storyboard artist as an assistant, or would they be going to the production designer? Who do people apply to, and do the more junior roles exist for those sort of stepping stones?
Shall I grab that one?
Yeah, why not?
Not in my experience, unfortunately. In storyboarding, it's sink or swim, really. So
you just got to put yourself out there as a storyboard artist from the get-go. Yeah,
there isn't really any opportunity to work as a junior in any way. I've tried to do that in the past on jobs to help people come in, but it's been a big no. I can see potentially in the future it might change, because myself and some colleagues are now being asked about jobs where they're asking you to be head of story, which is probably kind of like head of storyboard artists, and then the possibility would exist, but that isn't really a consistent thing that's happening at the moment. So yeah, you've just got to go for it.
I use assistants all the time. Usually they come by the supervising art director, but I use a lot of assistants to help me knock this stuff out. Yeah.
I don't know whether you can still hear me. I think my internet's dropped.
We can still hear you.
Oh, great. I've
lost can hear
my
you.
video pictures. That's great, as long as you can hear me.
Hey, Jonathan.
Yes.
If I could piggyback on Stephen's point, the only experience I have of them hiring, say, young people or people who are a little bit green was in feature animation. So at the feature animation studios, they have story departments, and they really like to hire young people. So like I worked at Arbon, and they had big story departments there, and they had lots of people who I went in there on a scheme of like character animators who wanted to move on in the industry, and then they have lots of like kids straight from college coming in, and sometimes I do a test and a pitch, and then they're in, they just get thrown over the trenches, and yeah, that's sometimes that's a good way in there.
I think we've lost Jonathan now. You think he has
We
been?
have. He's disappeared.
God, he's fled. He's scared. God.
Yes.
You know, to carry it on, concept art wise, you know, when I started out, I was actually a junior concept artist. I don't think that's the only time I've ever heard the term being used, to be honest with you. I've not seen one since. I think in movies, in art departments, I think you come in, you can either do it or you can't, in a similar way as storyboarding.
Yeah.
I think, though, I don't know for certain, but maybe in the VFX and game industry, when you're actually working in a studio, a permanent position, I think there may well be the opportunity as juniors in that. But actually on movies, in art departments, not anymore. No, many years ago maybe, but not now. It is a case of you come in and you know, you're thrown to the wolves, and you just got to fight and do it. Learn the hard way, I'm afraid. Which is great. It's the best way to learn, you know.
Yeah, I
No
was thrown
point to
in.
easy. Oh, Jonathan back.
I think.
Yes, I'm really sorry about that. My internet just died on me.
All right.
Somebody was talking about their experience, and then it dropped off, so I missed that entirely.
Well, we've covered it now.
We move on? Oh, fabulous. Very good. So next question for James or Stephen. Do you work on set during shooting, or is it mostly in pre-production?
James, do you want to answer this one first?
Hey, thanks, Stephen. I've been doing boards while the camera team have been setting up right next to me on location. So it depends really early on, or like on that job, it was quite nice that I went down with the director and DOP, and the DOP was a wild one, let's say. And in fact, when I was doing the boards for the shoot, he insisted I did a portrait of him, like with a gun to his head. But yeah, it varies. I'll pass to Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, mostly pre-production. I mean, that is generally the idea where storyboarding is meant to happen. But now it's bleeding right the way through into the shoot. And yeah, been same thing as James, been sitting on set before, working on set. And you're often called back now for reshoots. And you know, things to help with the editorial. So yeah, the job doesn't really end in pre-production anymore. They tend to run on. I think the closest I've got to the end of the shoot was a week. So yeah, wow. got right to the end, and then came back for the other end as well. So.
And here's a really important question. How do you decide how much to charge for a particular project? And at what point in your career did you feel you could increase your rate? So how about Rob? I haven't heard from you for a while. What do you think about how do you pitch the money side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on how much in demand you are, really. My rate always goes up when 3 people are calling me about the next job.
Brilliant. What about when you're starting out, though? How would you know where to pitch your wage level?
Well, I guess you could start with the BFDG website, of course, and the back to tables. It's probably the best place, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, it's down to experience though, and bargaining power. Yeah, I mean, as I say, I generally increase my rate every 3 or 4 films, not by a huge amount, but by a small amount, just to keep
That's
up
great.
with things.
Do you ever get people pushing back on that, or do
Yeah.
people just accept what you tell them?
No, I always have to deal with the UPN every time, and get my own bargain my own rate, bargain my own deal. Yeah, virtually every time. I mean, it should be the supervising art director's job to do that.
Yeah.
But they just don't do it these days. It just gets deflected directly onto me, and it usually involves 2 or 3 phone calls, but we always get there in the end.
Yeah. And I guess that leads on to another question about whether any of you have any representation, whether you have an agent, and if you do, then obviously they kind of fight your wage corner for you. But do any of you guys have agents?
No,
none.
I used to have.
James does.
Only for advertising.
Okay.
Because I do work with lots of advertising producers, and yeah, they do a lot of the rate, and they really bailed me out one time and got me a really super rate on one job. Really, at a rough time, it really helped me out. So
yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? If they, they either get you one job or make a difference on one job, then they paid for themselves. But yes, tricky one. Money is always tricky, negotiating your rate, particularly when you're starting out.
The very beginning of your career, it is really, really tough, and because you just don't know what to ask. And you go back to when I started, when I got the job on The Fifth Element. I hadn't got it. I'd just been in to see the designer, and the designer sort of put me on the spot. I hadn't even thought about it. I hadn't thought about money at all in any way. And the designer, Dan, said to me, "So Dom, what would you like to be paid a week?" And it was like, "Oh no, I don't know." And I had to think really quickly and think, well, how much I made doing book covers, and I was thinking, well, book covers, but when you get paid when you're doing a book, it's like it could be months until you get paid.
Yeah,
It was ridiculous. And I thought, well, how much would that be a week? And then up it a little bit, and I said, quite ballsy. I went, 250 quid a week, I think, something like that. And the
I think that was my first weekly rate as well.
The designer said, okay, that's very interesting and stuff, and we'll be in touch. And so I got in the car and I drove home back to Oxford, and I got home and the phone goes, and it was Dan, and he phoned up and says, yeah, we'd like you to be on the film, and it'll be for £500 a week. And
nice. It's nice when people are like that, isn't it?
Okay, thank you very much. And I literally put the phone down, and the first thing I did, I went into the garden and I danced with the dog. £500 a week.
Yeah.
£500 a week.
Yeah.
And and he didn't have to. He could have just said the 250, but he knew that for a junior concept artist on that film, he had a budget, and he gave it to me. Now, great. I don't know whether that would be the case today. We are much, we work under much tighter restrictions financially now. But you do have to put a little bit of faith in, when you're at the beginning, in the guy who's employing you, and just, put a bit of faith in him that he's going to do the right thing for you as well.
Yeah, and then what do you think about the flip side of that, where, because we're currently in a position where the industry, there's more supply than more demand than supply, and it's a very buoyant industry. And what do you think about people that don't have much experience, that kind of dig their heels in for a rate that is probably way above what they are worth? Do you think people, what I'm trying to say is, do you think people should accept a lower rate just to get themselves into the industry, or do you think people should stick to their guns and go for what a decent rate is?
But it's relevant to what it is that they're going, what rate they're actually going for. I mean, if they're going in and they know that the concept artists who have been working in the industry for 5, 10, 15, 20 odd years are getting this amount of money, and you go in and say, I want that amount of money.
Mm.
Well, then, you know, just kick them out the door and say, no, it doesn't work like that. You know, you've got to start.
You have to be realistic, don't you?
You have to be realistic about it. But it's very difficult being realistic if you don't know what the starting point is.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
It's really hard, but do a bit of research. If you are starting out, do talk with the Film Designers Guild, with other concept artists that you may have come across that and try and have an honest conversation with them of where they should start financially.
And do you think people should be willing to take a cut in the rate that they expect to get just to get their first job, just to have the experience?
If it's their first job, maybe, just to get their foot in the door. Getting your foot in the door is really, really difficult. And if you've got an opportunity to just get your foot in the door, you take that opportunity right at the very beginning. But, you will then learn as the years go on that every job you take, they will try and knock you down. Yeah. And the unwritten rule is you never go down, because if you go down, you can't go back up again. It's a fight to go back up. It's getting your wages a lot harder now, and it is really tricky if you accept it, because all the different film companies, the accountants, the UPMs, they all talk to each other. And so if you're going to get a job on a film, they will find out how much you were on the last one.
Yeah.
We'll go and
that's
say,
sort of
this amount of money. They go, well, hang on this last one, we know that you got paid this amount of money. And then
it's a sort of precedence, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
But you can creep your wage up every now and then. It is difficult, but you can do it. But usually it's because you turn around. On my last job, it was a case of me saying, do you know what? My wages hasn't gone up for ages, and you do have to sometimes blow your own trumpet and say, I do deserve a pay rise, and sometimes you get it. So it's a tough part of the industry that you have to try and get to terms with and fight. But I'd say go back to it. If it's your right at the very beginning of your career, any opportunity to get your foot in the door, to be in a studio, in an art department, whatever department in the film that you want to work in, whether it's production, whether it's set deck, construction, anywhere. If you've got an opportunity to get your foot in the door, you take it.
I think that's very good advice. And another piece of advice for people: what's something you regret not learning sooner, or you wish you knew earlier? That's a tough one, isn't it? What do you think, Eva? Have you got any regrets?
Oh my God!
Or something that you wish you knew earlier about the industry?
I don't know. I've just sort of run along, really, and just I don't really know. It's a
tough question. It's
a really tough question. I don't know how to answer it best. I mean, I've so far I've had great opportunities, work with some fantastic designers. I think sometimes, I don't know, at the end of the day, it's a film. We're making a film. We're not saving lives. Sometimes one can get really caught up in the sort of chaos of it all. But it's just maybe to be a little bit more chilled out is probably is what I could have done with earlier in my career.
Less stress. Yeah.
Less stress.
Yeah. I mean, it is important what we do, but at the end of the day, it's not important at all. So it's trying to find that balance of perspective, isn't
exactly.
it?
Yeah.
And then just a kind of a technical question about workflow and what kind of software people use to create the work that they do. I mean, I'm sure you all use different bits of software, but is there anything that's kind of a industry standard for Stephen, let's say for storyboard art? Is there kind of, do you work on a tablet, for example, or do you work on a
just on a Wacom tablet? Like, I've got a few different sizes. I've got one which is the same size as my laptop, which is really good because it's portable. And then I've had a larger one for like 2 years since kind of lockdown, which I've had at home, which I've kind of got used to working on now, which is good.
And what
and
software
then
do you use with that?
it's pretty much always Photoshop, really.
Yeah.
Sometimes I dabble into Painter, and then a little bit of 3D, as and when, really. But yeah, the vast majority of time it's just the tablet and Photoshop. I do know that some guys are migrating over just to working on an iPad now that the pen's really good and you've got a much bigger iPad available, and I think some guys really enjoy that. But yeah, that's my setup. It's pretty simple, really, and effectively it's hand drawing but on the screen most of the time. Yeah.
And how about you, Rob? What's your kind of go-to
Yeah,
software hardware package?
Yeah, well, in terms of software, Rhino 3D is what I use most of the time. If not that, Fusion 360, a bit of SketchUp and a bit of ZBrush, but 95% of the work is in Rhino, really. Drawing up stuff, drawing up my files in that, then putting them into 3D print software to get it on the printers. But having said
that, that was all self-taught, Rhino. When you did you learn it yourself?
Yeah, self-taught over a sort of fairly packed in 3 or 4 months every night. But yeah, got it down mostly now. So yeah, Rhino's the one, because you can bring in so many file formats to Rhino and export out so many as well. I can change the meshes, I can change the density of the meshes, I can, all that sort of thing. I can do everything on there. But also, I do use SketchUp extensively. A lot of people say, "Oh, you can't create anything accurately in SketchUp."
Oh, I use it all the time.
I use it all the time. Yeah, try telling engineers and fine woodworkers that you can't draw things properly in SketchUp. I can draw down to 0.1 of a mil in SketchUp. Yeah, I use it.
And do you need
all the time.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you need particularly heavy duty hardware to run Rhino successfully?
No, not really. No, I just run it on my laptop, i7 processor. Fine. It depends on how you're rendering your 3D. As long as you're not expecting to orbit around a fully rendered model and you're just looking at it shaded or wireframe or something like that, you're fine. But yeah, certainly if you go to a fully rendered model and you're trying to orbit around it or fly around it or whatever, it will slow right down for sure.
And Eva, what's your software of choice?
For 3D, it's Modo, and then I paint over it in Photoshop. But I've heard a lot of people like Blender, and so I've started looking into that a little bit. I mean, there's some quite one of the visual effects art directors on Barbie was doing some quite really nice things. You can manipulate quite big scenes very, very efficiently in Blender, and it's free, and there is an abundance of tutorials out there. And yeah, so I think that's lots of people seem to like that quite a lot for that particular reason.
How about you, Dominic? Are you similar kind of setup, or do you have any different bits of software that you use?
Oh, right. Setup is I use 2 big monitors, a large format Wacom tablet. Software wise, mainly Photoshop, Painter, 3D wise Modo, ZBrush. Although if I was to say to people to learn software now, it'd be Blender, mainly because it's free. I think the software companies are ripping people off now. People are, you have to pay subscriptions for this software, and I paid for Modo, over and over the years, and then I had to go to subscription, and they weren't gonna, it's just like, Blender I think will put all these companies out of business eventually, because it is becoming an industry norm now. So many guys use it, and not just the young people coming up. It's it's used in houses, VFX houses, and all sorts of people now. So I think that's really the way to go, particularly concept art wise. you know, I've got these software packages, and it goes back to your previous question: is what do you regret? My regret is not learning it sooner. My issue, which is probably another discussion, is I have learning issues, and learning 3D is a particular problem for me. Yeah. And even though I first bought Lightwave back in, you know, when I had a gateway computer in, you know, like the year 2000, you know, I've learnt the basics of 3D, but I've never been able to master it. And the main reason is I just can't withhold the information. So, you know, if I could, I'd actually delete all my memory of Lightwave, Modo, any other 3D program, and I'd put it all into learning Blender.
Well,
But ZBrush is amazing.
That's really fantastic answers from all of you. I know we're probably about to wrap up now, but I just wanted to thank you all for your fantastic input, and I hope that's been really useful for all the people listening in. I think there's a possibility that we could maybe make some breakout rooms if people wanted to hang on and chat further. But as far as the surgery goes, I'm going to bring that to a close now. And thank you once again for all of your input.
No worries. Been a pleasure.
Yep. Thank you. No worries. Yep.
Thanks, Jonathan.